Hey, I'm Devin Stewart, and I'm going to go over the operations manual development for the San Luis Obispo YMCA, which was my senior project for IME 482, and my technical advisor was Carla Carrickman. So the agenda for this presentation is to talk about the background a little bit, go into the YMCA's problem, and the problem statement and the objectives that I had for this project and the operations manual development, the design approach for the operations manual, go over the deliverables, talk about the methodology of why I did what I did, and go into the conclusion, what I learned and what would be better to do next time. So the background. The previous sports director at the YMCA was let go a few months ago, leaving an open position. And when the new director took the job, she found the place was in complete disarray. A couple anecdotes for example here is there were checks on registration forms stuffed into a desk, which led to a large loss of revenue, and the old sports director had just shoved them there. The new sports director found them when she moved into the desk. And another example is that when the new sports director had to make some pamphlets very early on in her time there, she didn't know any of the regulations that the school districts had or that the YMCA had, and so she just made some pamphlets, had to redo them 2 or 3 times to make sure that they were bilingual and they met all the requirements that the YMCA had. And some kind of process documentation or manual in place would have helped significantly in these, onboarding times. And I knew that the YMCA needed this sort of help from my IME 303 project management class, where one of the projects was to help the YMCA raise some money. Now the problem statement and the objectives. The San Luis Obispo YMCA's current organizational issues lead to them losing revenue, lose members, and overwork their employees. And so some of the objectives I had in this project were to collect information about the YMCA sports department operations, and then use the information to create a work breakdown structure for the manual, and develop the operations manual outline from groups of information, and then provide the YMCA with a process for continual improvement of the operations manual. This sort of overworking their employees and losing members were a direct result of the organizational issues that they had, where there just aren't enough people and they need the extra sort of organization to deal with their lack of manpower. Now going into the design approach a little bit here, because I was designing the project plan for them, after I had to scope the project down to make sure that I would be able to complete it on time, being one person dealing on a project this big, I had to really avoid scope creep to make sure that the project was finishable with the amount of time that I could devote to it. Because an operations manual for the entire YMCA sports department was very large. It took a long time just to plan it and organize the entire thing, so I can't imagine how long it's going to take to write it. The current estimation is around 162 days. So the human factors going into the project, trying to make sure that you're addressing short-term memory, safety, and ergonomics, because there's people dealing with these projects, but those are the big 3 that will affect people directly using the manual and designing the manual. Risk analysis, because not everyone is an employee who's using this, and that children are a big part of the program, and you want to make sure that everything is safe and reliable as possible. And on top of that, using some Six Sigma and Lean, because the YMCA is really low on resources and they want to increase their efficiency as much as possible. So the deliverables for the YMCA were to give them a project plan and a process to develop the manual, along with a process for continuous improvement to make sure the manual stays relevant to them, and a report out and feedback to make sure that they can have a way to get back in touch with me if they need to change anything or if they need anything done with the manual. So now let's look at the work breakdown structure and the Gantt chart. Here's the work breakdown structure for the manual. It's around 114 different items as organized by what the YMCA asked for. Throughout the entire process, I was making sure to meet with the YMCA, ask them questions, make sure that they were getting value out of this project, and make sure that they got exactly what they wanted. So there's all the different sections of information from, paperwork to money, correspondence, planning, training, miscellaneous. Really just trying to make sure that the YMCA had all of their bases covered with this manual and make sure that there were no extra things that they would need to add later. But if they are, I also made sure to teach them exactly what they needed to do to add things to the manual and to plan for those eventualities. And here's the Gantt chart. So currently the project is scheduled to begin on June 2nd, which is the Thursday shown over here on the right side of the screen. And this Gantt chart is pretty big with lots of predecessors because currently there's only one resource working on developing the manual, which is the sports director. So in order to make sure that she had everything that she needed to do to complete this, I made sure to organize it all with finish to start lags so that there's nothing that overlaps. But she was mentioning to me that there may be an assistant coming into the picture soon. So in that case, I made sure to add resources so that she could split the work up if she needed to. These are all the things mentioned in the work breakdown structure. All of these break down into further tasks, and almost every base is covered here. The project is currently scheduled to take about 6 months given their time that they can devote to the project and the amount of work that it will take to complete. The Gantt chart's very big and hard to show, but if you look at the right side of the screen now, you can see that all of this is lasting until the end of the year. And for the process for continuous improvement, essentially it's just a checklist that I'm going to be delivering to them that is the steps that they need to take to ensure the manual is useful. Making sure that all the information is up to date, making sure that the groupings of information are accurate, and making sure that there aren't any extraneous sections in the manual that they could just remove to make sure that it adds value to their company. Now some of the methodology. Obviously value for the YMCA was one of the first and most important things for this project. Making sure that they always had what they were looking for and what they wanted. Organization and structure were really big, needing to make sure that they have an organized system to deal with anything that may come up, and systems to deal with future problems they may have with the manual. Hence the process for continuous improvement, along with all the meetings I had with the YMCA to go over the project planning methods and to show them how they could make changes. The manual itself is a lasting form of documentation, so they can, when the next sports director is hired, there isn't a huge problem with all the disorganized things that are going on at the company, and that they can actually just have a clean handoff of all the information the new sports director will need to know. Now, another important part of this manual is that it was designed to be modular, which means that the sports director has access to all of the information, but she can pass off different sections of it to parents, to coaches, to referees, to make sure that they have all the information that they need at the company and within the sports department. And so all of that information is flagged in the Gantt chart and in the work breakdown structure. And then as the manual is developed, she will keep the separate sections for each of those different groups to make sure that they have the information that they need when they need it. And then, as I've been mentioning, I met with the YMCA a lot to make sure that they had the product that they wanted. So verifying that the product was actually valuable to them and going back to them frequently, probably about once a week, to make sure that everything was exactly what they wanted it to be. So conclusion, I think that the manual will add a lot of value to the YMCA, making sure that they're organized and that they stay on task, and they don't have any big problems with future changeovers. Scoping the project actually turned out to be incredibly important because as I kept talking to the YMCA and they kept asking for things, they kept wanting more and more out of the project plan, make it more detailed, make it more accurate, make sure that everything was ready to go. So the fact that I scoped the project early to avoid extreme scope creep helped a lot because it still took a very long time to plan and organize everything that they needed out of the manual. Now, in an ideal situation, I would have been able to give more time to, given more time or with more workforce, I would have been able to get more data from other sites of the YMCA to see if they had similar problems or to see if I could solve their problems as well, or if they had solved these issues, see what they did to do it, and see if that was a reasonable method. Another thing that would be great to done would be to examine other similar successful programs, other sports departments like the AYSO or other youth organizations, to see if they had similar process documentation that would be easily adapted to the YMCA's purposes. And one thing that would be great is to be able to stick around and follow up with the YMCA further and ensure that the planning process and the processes for continuous improvement go over well over time. Now, it would also have been nice to be able to have a sort of less biased stance, because I was constantly working with the YMCA sports department, making sure that they got what they wanted. But it would have been better to have a design that was not based on that at all, and was based on the, extremely rigorous engineering documentation that would have been perfect. However, I needed to make sure that it was something that was valuable to them, not just that. So as for the economic and environmental impact, the economic impact is actually very difficult to quantify. Last year, the YMCA made around $70,000 with around $150,000 in expenses. They support around 3,000 youth with varying registration fees. Now, with their new process documentation, they should save a little bit in expenses, having to make sure they don't waste all their time and money, and they probably will make a little bit more money because it'll be easier for them to get the word out to places sooner and make sure that they're organized in their marketing strategies and in their execution of their sports department programs. But it's hard to say exactly how much that'll change given the effect that it'll have on the company. We're talking about 2 or 3 layers of chain. It'll probably save them or make them a lot of extra money though. As for the environmental impact, the modular manual will help save pages being printed, because we're not printing the entire thing every time, just handing it off to people the sections that they need. And they'll be able to use their company assets more effectively to save money and to save resources. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.